Hello, everybody. I am so pleased to be talking today with a young woman who comes all the way from Texas with a Texas style amount of passion. And as a Kentucky girl myself, I can really recognize when the Southern lifestyle, the uniqueness of being a Jew in America, where it creates for us interesting opportunities to discover how our identity really does become shaped and how it expresses itself or how we choose to express that identity through the activism channels that we find. Well, I am so proud to be here with Adina of Is It Kosher? And most people on Instagram these days probably have seen her posts circulating through their feeds because this young woman has approached social media activism in a very unique and I would even say simplistic way in order to meet the needs of the current generation that we're facing, which is people want it simple, to the point, and they don't want to have to think too much. And therefore, breaking it down into the individual issues becomes a challenge for anyone who is trying to spread the voice of activism for Jewish rights and for Israel on Instagram, or any other platform. Adina, welcome with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. It is really so great to meet a young individual like yourself. Why don't you give a little introduction? Tell us about you.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, my name is Adina. I grew up in Texas. I still live in Texas. But my family's from all over the world. My dad is South African. My mom is half Israeli. So grew up in this very kind of mixed cultured household. I went to public school. I grew up really not inside of this Jewish bubble that I think a lot of people grew up in the Northeast. But I grew up very, very involved in the Jewish community. I was in USY and BBYO and Young Judea. I went to Camp Young Judea, Texas in Wimberley, Texas, and then Camp Tel Yehuda in upstate New York. So really,
Oh,
really
wow.
involved. And then when I was in college, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, hook 'em horns. We did beat Michigan yesterday. um, I was involved in Hillel and Olami and Chabad. I was in a Jewish sorority. I was a sweetheart for a Jewish fraternity. So I got like really, really, really involved, and it kind of has never wavered my whole life. And then once I graduated, it plummeted a lot. And it took a little
Right.
bit to get back out there and be involved in the local Jewish community in Dallas.
Wow. And did you get actively involved? Sounds like you and I have got a lot of interesting background in common. The youth movements are so fundamental in our
Yes.
summer camp experience. They're so fundamental for our development as Jews. Did you find that after college you could find yourself a niche in the community that you could actively get involved in?
Yeah, so I think when you graduate college, there's a lot of things that are missing. So I moved to Dallas not knowing that many people. I knew like two people. And so I had so much anxiety about going to events where I didn't know anybody. It wasn't the same as college where they're just, on campus being like, come to our events. And
Mhm.
so I think in Dallas, we all know each other. And so everyone goes to all the events, regardless of what observant level the organization is affiliated with. So I go to Chabad. There's one specifically for young professionals in Dallas, which is amazing. And I go
Wow.
to Olami, which is like Orthodox. I also sit on a synagogue board for 20s and 30s of a conservative shul as well. And so I've kind of got my hand in a lot of different areas in the Dallas like young professional space, but I think Dallas is unique in that way. And I have not heard of any other city really having this connected of like a young professional space. I've heard that some of the larger cities like New York and LA, they're too spread out, there's too many people. And then Austin is a little bit too small. So Dallas is like this perfect
Mm.
sized community right now.
Well, that's very interesting because I know that in the larger cities, there's also issues with the, shall we say, organizational territorialism, the competition that exists between these different organizations make it really hard, I'm told, for some young professionals to find a place where they can fit in because
Yeah.
maybe one thing speaks to one of their interests, but not necessarily to everything. You've really been able to kind of get involved across the spectrum of potential opportunities. That's amazing. Are other young people like you in your community? I mean, or are you really just this go-getter? Because it sounds like you're pretty much this amazing go-getter.
Um, there are people that are activists. I wouldn't necessarily say on social media. I think that is a little bit different of what I do. But we have had rallies before. We've had young professionals attend rallies, get people to rallies, volunteer to logistically help. There've been people, we had some issues at like our city council in Dallas. They were going down there
Oh,
to
great.
counter protest. So we've got a lot of different involvement. And we also have people who are more so involved in these organizations, helping to sponsor events, get people to events, really connect Jews back to the community. We have a whole WhatsApp for like Dallas Jews that are young professionals. We have a Google Calendar, which all the organizations put their stuff in. So there's some overlap, but that way people can actually know what's happening in the community. They can go to everything. And so I think this is just a Dallas uniqueness of people getting involved and people wanting people to get involved and stay involved. So yeah.
I hear it and I realize just how much of a common thread there is, I think, between all of the different small the small Southern Jewish communities. I
Mhm.
think that there's something unique, and maybe it's the idea of being so much the other in the society that we're living in that it drives people to be more involved, that they'll give their time. Sounds to me you give a tremendous amount of your time to your community.
Yeah, basically that's outside of my 9 to 5, that's what I'm doing is being involved in the
This
Jewish
is on top of
community.
being a full-time job. That
Yes.
is incredible. You are an inspiration for other people. I can tell you that. That's
Thank
really phenomenal.
you.
Well, a lot of people are suffering, especially in the last year. And now, we're coming up on a year and people are suffering from what I call compassion fatigue. It's just too much already. How are we supposed to keep breathing? How are we supposed to keep coping? We are dealing with more and more division, more and more bad news. Every day there's another terror attack attempt, if not one that is successful here in Israel. And of course, we're seeing another violent attack against Jews everywhere, not only in the United States, but around the world. And not only on campuses, because I think that there are so many areas of attention being targeted on the campus reality. But you touch on something that I've always felt is an undiscussed and undisclosed dilemma, which is the young professionals. For years, they talked in the organizational world about how do we get the young Jews? And you're exactly the age group of, you're now post college. And so you're the age group where organizations are saying you are our future. It's very hard sometimes to reach the young professionals because they want to have their 9 to 5. They just want to live their life. What do you think is an effective method? What has been effective in your community or your experience to really get young professionals out there, engaged and involved when essentially it is as a volunteer? There's not compensation, there's no major available funds. What do you think drives people to do more with their time?
Yes, I think there's a few things. I think one of the things that we've really, really discovered post 10/7 was right after 10/7, we had a lot of educational events and then people stopped showing up. And it wasn't because they didn't care, they just were so burnt out. So we just completely pivoted and started doing events like bowling and
Old
paint
school,
paintball gun. Like, I mean, we
mamash.
went old school. We started
Wow.
showing, got tickets to see the new Golda movie and started kind of trying to say, hey, we're gonna create a space to be Jewish, but you can just go bowl with your friends. Like, we're not going to try to force you to sit through educational lectures, sit through speakers. We just want to create a safe space. And that is really what worked, because so many of us work in, I call like the non-Jewish world. My 9 to 5 is with people who do not understand what we go through on a day-to-day basis. They don't understand why I'm crying for somebody who was murdered that I barely know. They don't get it. So young Jews really wanted a space where they don't have to talk about it, but people get it. And so that is really what has worked in the Dallas community. We've done challah bakes, we've done things that are just so low stress that people can show up. And that has really worked. Our community has really turned up. And we've had ebbs and flows. We've had times where people are like, I'm done, I'm burned out. And then something happens on the news and they're like, okay, I'm ready to show up again. And I think just kind of trying to meet young professionals where they're at is like so much more important than trying to get them to be where we want them to be.
That's really, it's astounding to see how that we have to live with that flux all the time. How much energy do I have? I have to pull away. That's also a part of our healing. That's also a part of our coping. And then there are people who say, I want to get more involved. Well, let's talk about how they're involved also, not just in the local community, because it is amazing that they're out there, they're going to city councils, they're fighting the different resolutions that are coming out. And it's amazing to see that kind of activism. But you've taken on a whole different level of activism by creating your Is It Kosher Instagram page. Why don't you tell us what was the impetus for this? What gave you that idea?
So this actually started back in 2020. My friend and I, during COVID, we were still in university. And this was around the time when all of those BLM protests and marches started happening. And we were in Texas, and we kind of started noticing this trend of anti-Semitism in this type of activism space. And we started to ask these questions around our community, especially in Texas. How do we support an organization that is kind of promoting hatred towards us? We want to support the cause. And so that's kind of where this idea came about of like, what's kosher, what's not kosher. And we actually had a podcast. So we made 5 episodes, and the Instagram was originally to promote the podcast. And then college kind of got in the way when COVID started clearing up. And so we let it go. And the page was just sitting there, and I was the only one with the login, and it had 51 followers. And in December, well, I had been doing activism on my own page, like my personal Instagram account, just resharing educational things on my story, writing some things. I did like a few posts on my own Instagram, but they were so heavy and people were reading them, but they were my friends, so they were going to read them. And then in December, Kanye West posted a apology in Hebrew, and everyone was like debating this apology. And I randomly one day to my friends was like, is it kosher? Like, and they were like, that's so funny. And then I remembered I had this Instagram account just sitting there. So I pulled it on the story of this Instagram account, and I shared the story to my page, and I said kosher, unkosher, and I randomly put kosher style because that's kind of like a thing, and it blew up. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing these polls because people find them funny. And then one of my friends was like, oh, you should do these weekly roundup of all of these events that you're polling, all of these incidents that are happening all over the world. And then I came up with the idea of like these kosher on kosher posts, and it kind of just spread from there. I mean, it was technically it's my page and technically I'm the one making the content, but I've had so much input from friends and supporters. And so I really try to make this page for everybody. And I've even put that in my intro slides is like, I want suggestions. I want you to send me stuff. I want you to tell me the controversial things we want pulled.
That's a really different approach than the way that most people try to advance themselves through social media. So much of it is about, forgive me, but the me influencer, right? It's all about me, and and you're on the other hand in the background where it's the information and the idea that you're putting forward. Do you find that it's a little bit difficult to navigate between the political issues that are so divisive for people today? Or do you think that you're able to kind of walk the fine line and keep people from both sides of the spectrum actually engaged through your materials?
So I really try to walk the line as best as possible. I have gone off the path a few times, and it's not that I've gotten hate for it, but people have kind of been like, hey, this is very different than what you normally do. But I've had some people who've reached out to me saying, you are the only page that's getting to me right now, which was
Mm.
shocking to hear because I'm a small account. I'm a 24-year-old and I'm doing all this advocacy work. And a lot of it was for myself to have a space to process everything that was happening. But to be told, I understand what you're saying because you're not screaming politics at me was like amazing to hear because that really was a goal of mine was to try to reach people, to try to unify people. At the end of the day, regardless of politics, we are a community. We have to live together. We have to work together. We have to break bread with each other. We have to date each other. So, what is the point of screaming politics at each other when we've been around longer than US politics and we might be around longer? So, what is the point of taking boxing gloves to each other? There isn't one. And so I really try. Of course, I'm human. I'm gonna fail sometimes at that, but I do try my very best.
Well, and I think that we're living in a time where people politicize even non-political matters. Well, we can look even at the unfortunate situation with the hostage crisis, which has become politically charged almost within the first couple of months already. And it's very unfortunate to see and to live through, but it's also maybe a reflection of reality. This rich Jewish education that you grew up with,
Mhm.
you clearly have a grasp of just how much we're living previous epochs of history just again and in a new form. And so maybe we have to realize that we can't be completely divorced from a political understanding, even if we choose to make sure we're not partisan. And that's what something that we at Israel Forever have always tried to do. Well, I have worked with left, right, middle, everything in between, religious, non-religious, atheist, everything in between, and all the different age groups. And so that fluidity, I think, has been for us a sign of the success of a grassroots effort. And you, one young woman, are also showing signs of the success of a grassroots effort. How many followers are you up to by now? You started with 51, you mentioned. How many are
Yeah,
you up to by now? You're
I'm
in the
double
thousands.
checking. Yeah, I'm at this morning I hit 2,732 and it's been since really January. So that's
Wow,
much I've
that's
grown now.
and all organic, all just by the natural, if we're able to get around the algorithm, however we're able to do it, right?
Yes, I
That's
mean I've
really
done yeah. I've done some like collaborations, but that's like
Yeah,
on
I was going to
Instagram.
mention
Yeah.
your collaborations. I was going to mention your collaborations because actually we've had some co-collaborations, so to speak. And
Yeah.
not only have we collaborated with each other, but you've
Mhm.
also collaborated with other people we collaborate with. And and they're people that like we don't all know each other. You're
Right.
in Texas. I know that you've connected with the Sababa sisters, for example.
Mhm.
And they're in LA. And
Yeah.
I've got, so we've got all these different people who are coming together through social media. And social media is a volatile, ugly, hateful space. How do you stay strong?
That's a good question. I think part of it is having support of other content creators. There's a few group chats, and we kind of support each other and also hold each other accountable, which is important, making sure we're putting out the right information and not the fastest information. And
Oh, that's
also,
great. I'm so glad to hear that because I didn't
yeah,
know. And I'm a content creator just of a different kind. And my team, we're constantly creating content. But it's also interesting that we're based in Israel, you're based in America. It's interesting how much those groups might be, isolated from one another or know each other because that's part of the unity we want to build.
mhm.
So these groups help you. They give you some strength to keep going past the hate.
Yeah, some of them. And then, my friends in Dallas are like very supportive of this. And people in Dallas have started to learn about the Instagram and they're like, wow, like I had a guy come up to me at an event, a Shabbat event on Friday, and he said, I don't want to say what you're doing is a mitzvah, but like it's a mitzvah. And I was like, thank you.
It is a
And so
mitzvah.
I just get a lot of support, and so many people tell me keep going, keep going. Even before they found out that I was like Gen Z, I was getting all of that love, and then after they find out I was Gen Z, it was even more so, and I have the support of my parents. My dad bought me a phone stand without like asking. He was just like, here you go. He sent it to me, and I was like, okay. My mom's probably like my number
Wow.
one fan. She tells all her friends to follow me. And so there's a lot of love and there's a lot of support. Of course, there's some hate online, but for the most part, the support from everybody I know has been really positive.
That's really uplifting to hear and inspiring. I hope that some of the people who are listening and able to learn from you could apply it to their own lives. You referred to yourself as Gen Z, and there's, all of the bias about who is Gen Z and where do they stand on Israel.
Mhm.
Where do you think that the rest of your generation has gone wrong? What do you think is lacking that you would like to say to them if you could?
Sometimes I just want to take these people and really shake them because it's actually crazy the rhetoric that is being taught and heard. And I honestly don't know if this is a Gen Z failure or if we were failed by older generations. It's hard to say because I am also Gen Z, I'm sitting in it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of Gen Z, they've never met somebody who's Jewish. They don't actually know us. They don't see us. A lot of them are from small town USA. They don't know us. They come to these big cities and they're meeting Jewish people for the first time and maybe even getting a bad first impression from one person that happens to be Jewish. And so it's this constant struggle of we have information at our fingertips, and yet so many people that I even met in college had never met somebody Jewish before until they met me. And that was a lot of
Mhm.
pressure, but it also was a good opportunity to say, I'm a good person, my people are good people, and this is who we are. This is what we look like. We're not just a community that's hated. We're a community that has comedy and laughter, and we're so much more than just a people to be hated.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The whether or not you were failed is a question nobody really wants to ask themselves, because that means we have to look to the parents who worked so hard to be able to provide an education and a life for their Jewish children wherever they were. And the generation before them and the generation before them, part of the process of becoming American, as you say in Yiddish, Amerikaner worden, right? That's what they actually said when they came to America. We have to become American. We have to cast off our greenness. And in the process, many people just stopped learning what it meant to be a Jew. So I think that if we look at something like your experience, you must have had parents who were encouraging you to have all those encounters and all of those learning opportunities that you had. Maybe that's also one of the ways that we've failed. We have not given them, you made a sentence before that we are a people. The reason we failed is because those kids, those Gen Z who are quick to believe the lies about Israel, don't recognize the Jews as a people, and they don't recognize us as an indigenous people with rights to the land. Without those two elements, without having any faith, it doesn't matter how you practice
Mhm.
necessarily, but if you have faith as a Jew, then we can't be divorced from our history as Jews, from the land that God gave us. That fundamental difference seems to me to it be one of the kernels of what makes you you, and maybe some of your friends the way they are. I'm interested if you are in touch with some of those people from campus life or even your youth movement and summer camp life. Have you ever heard from them that they're also involved, or do even amongst those circles do you feel like you're kind of unique in your activism?
There are some that are involved. I don't know if I've seen anybody really pop up, especially because I think a lot of the Jewish content creators, we start to know each other. So I haven't seen
Mm-hmm.
anybody that I know really pop up off the top of my head. I think there is a lack of young professionals in this kind of advocacy space. But what I have seen, and maybe this is veering off topic, but unfortunately, some people that I was in youth group with are now against us, and they do that kind of advocacy. And I've seen that honestly more so than I've seen people that are still with us sharing and things like that. I think unfortunately people have disconnected, and I don't know where we went wrong. It's hard to say, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because it shows that even with the same kind of education and experience, this generation is a generation, your generation was raised to question everything to such a degree that there is really no truth to the Jewish experience,
Mhm.
even as they simultaneously, affix all truth to the Gazan experience and the Hamas information that they are, taking in as if it is, so to speak, a drug.
Mhm.
It's a very dangerous reality, and I think that it's been very difficult for organizations to get young professionals involved, even with all of the efforts for alumni outreach. And I've been involved with many over the years. I was the Young Leadership Action Network chair, the international chair for B'nai B'rith, and even back then, and that was 30 years ago, and it was difficult because everybody wanted to just live their life and have a job. So how
Mhm.
do you fit it in? And then when Israel is at war, you're expected to choose a side that aligns you with the same morals of your colleagues and your friends. And so you easily get swayed. I want to touch back on what you mentioned, which is that your eye opening moment, it sounds to me, is when you were very much in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think this happened for a lot of people, where they were like, yes, we stand by your rights. Again, we're Southern women. We know
Yeah.
about Jews and the civil rights movement. Yes. And the love between the Black community and the Jewish community all those years. I mean, it was the most beautiful thing to grow up with, always learning about that. And then it's been completely disintegrated with the current crisis that we're facing. So for you, a lot of people today who are social media influencers they had a wake up moment on October 7th. But it actually sounds to me your wake up moment happened when you realized that your own social justice activism was not really welcome or reciprocated because you were a Jew
I
and
think,
Jewish issues didn't matter. Go ahead.
yeah, I don't know if I was ever really asleep. I guess I think I've always been awake to it. I think
Yeah.
that movement and that issue made it more so apparent that I need to do something more than just speak to the people around me. And so
Yeah.
that was that kind of wake up call. But I went to public school. I dealt with, you know, anti-Semitism my whole life. I had a teacher who tried to not let me remake a pop quiz that was on Yom Kippur. And I had another teacher who tried to deny Israel's existence. And a bunch of the Jewish mothers went down to the school to say, no, this is not okay. She's a world geography teacher. You can't do this. I had somebody scream at me and call me the K word in the middle of my high school. And so I was never fully asleep. I think that part of being in the South is always your whole life already knowing that,
Yeah.
because we are
Yeah.
surrounded, we are not in a bubble. Maybe
Right.
in some of the bigger cities, maybe if you only went to Jewish private school, but for the most part in the South, we were never fully in a bubble.
Interesting. Interesting. I bet there's a lot there that others could unpack in terms of what it means for them if they're searching for themselves. They're a young person like you, or even maybe a parent of
Mhm.
someone your age. Because I know that I've always tried to speak to the parents who have felt lost. They also feel that they were failed in some way, that they didn't have the passion, the empowerment to give their children. They didn't have the knowledge to give their children to teach them otherwise, not about Israel and not about, not about the conflict and not about even Jewish identity. They go to synagogue this time of year, that time of year, but we push deeper. I think there are a lot of people today who are finding, in a good way, it's a danger with the word woke, but finding a wake up moment and seeing the danger of the woke is something I think all ages. And that's why I think that your words can be an inspiration, not only for others your age, who could get out of their own bubble and find alternative ways to, let's just review a few things here. Reach across the spectrum, try and be creative. You created polls trying to get people's opinion. You successfully stayed relatively apolitical, apartisan, and you really targeted a community of followers who are not only young professionals, but does include young professionals, one of the hardest communities to tap into. You know, when people are off campus, they're off Israel. We even heard it after the last semester that when they were on campus fighting the haters, they were like so involved. And then boom, they go home. What do they got? There's no activism, there's no programming. And the programming that there is, and it's at the synagogue or and it's not their cup of tea. So I think another point you've highlighted other people can learn from is to create your safe space, something that I've been encouraging since day one after this massacre. Without that safe space, people are more afraid. And we have been encouraging a lot of people to host little salon gatherings. You know, they used to do this in the late 1800s. Jews who, it was very dangerous at a certain period of time, and in Austria, long before the Holocaust, it was pretty dangerous to be public as a Jew with your activism. And so they would just gather in people's homes. It wouldn't always be at the synagogue, as a way to take it out of that space and create one where it was facilitating informal social dynamic. I hope that that's something that our listeners could be able to learn from and employ. And of course, I hope they're going to come and follow Is It Kosher? And what do you think? Tell me some of the favorites that you've had. Okay, some of the favorites or the most successful. What have been the messages you feel have been, I know that I made an impact? Because you're a woman who I see. Your drive is about the mitzvah, but it's also about the impact. You're opening minds. You've gotten outside your own echo chamber by creating an external space. What's been the most effective question, method, post that has worked for you?
Yeah, so I've noticed this trend recently that all of my kosher unifying posts don't do well, like at all. It's the ones that get people's attention, the ones that are maybe actually slightly controversial to the outside world, but aren't controversial to us. It's the ones that are slightly comedic, where I said that Candace Owens was unkosher. People are like, of course, but also this is kind of funny the way that you made this post. And so I think as much as it's covering all of the sensitive subjects, it's adding a correct amount of humor to it to get people involved in that. And one of my favorite posts, which actually didn't do well, but I did a post and it was kosher, my love for Israel, but I did it in all of these different languages that we speak from all over the world. And I had, I was posting on my story, hey, if you speak, this language or that language or any language that I haven't heard of, like, please, message me. I want to get input from everybody. And the message was, even though we're divided by language, we are united by this love for Israel. And that is what we are all fighting for at the end of the day, is for our people, for Israel, for the hostages to come home. And so as much as that post didn't do well in likes, it did well in the sense of the people who saw it resonated with it. They loved it. It was so unifying to see that I don't speak the same language as a lot of Jews all over the world, and yet we have the same exact mission. I can fly anywhere in the world, and I've got somebody that will host me for Shabbat dinner. And I think that that is kind of the idea that I really try to drive behind all of my posts, regardless if they're kosher or unkosher. I try to post things that everybody's going to relate to, that everyone can get behind.
I think that that's a very, a lofty challenge, and I think it's a commendable one. I liked actually the way that you had phrased, I think we were a collaborator on it in the end, which was the vaccines, the irony that you took something, because it actually referred to the execution of the 6 hostages in the context of Israel putting in a temporary ceasefire in order to issue vaccines, which our children, hostages, did not receive. And you took something that was very intense and serious. You have this very unique style, this particular font that you repeat again and again. And so it's almost like, for me, when I looked at it, it's like, whoa, okay. It made me stop and think, because it was a heavy issue in a non-heavy way. I think that's been a unique element of your style, and that's probably what attracts people to following you. And I do hope that you grow in followers. However, I'm going to touch on this last point you just made. It didn't get that many likes. Maybe we have to stop gauging it on that. The engagement that you get, those conversations and those comments, I think that sometimes that's really the measure of the impact of our mitzvah. You're doing your own kind of kiruv, your own kind of outreach. Let me bring them closer to the truth. Let us, challenge them. And let's play a little game, though, you and I. We're going to do a little kosher, non-kosher game here, okay? So let's banter back and forth. So let's see. Ismail Hania being targeted assassination in Iran. It's aroused all of the hate of the world. Kosher or non-kosher?
It's complicated because we're not supposed to like celebrate death, but also like we're celebrating the fact that we can now live because he's gone. I want to say kosher. We're always gonna
I'm
be
with that.
hated,
Let's hold up. Yeah, listen, we put him in the category with Haman. So we're gonna ooh when we hear his name. But I definitely think that Israel's talent at targeted assassinations and minimizing civilian casualties is totally kosher. All right, let's get another one here. Okay. You've got lots and lots of young Jews, who are coming out, like you said, even with your own youth group and high school alumni, and shockingly, they have the same education as you, and yet there they are fighting for the rights of the people who actually murdered and raped and beheaded. Kosher or unkosher?
Unkosher.
Unkosher. Unkosher. How hard is it for us to help them see how unkosher it is, right? We have no way of helping them see the kosher way. And that's a real danger. Do you think that you're able to open minds with some of your posts to even reaching those Gen Z who are very confused, they're very lost, they drank a little bit of the anti-Israel Kool-Aid and didn't realize that they are on the verge of hardcore anti-Semitism? Do you think that they can be saved?
I think it's a really complicated question, and I think unfortunately, it will take a tragedy for them to wake up. I think
another one.
I would like to themselves. There's an account called Bad Takes Pally, and they've actually blocked me from calling them out, but they have said in their Instagram that Jews do not belong in pro-Palestinian spaces. And so it is crazy to me that there are Jews who go and actively hate their own people to be in those spaces because they want acceptance so badly. And they will even be told by the people they're doing activism for that they don't belong. And I don't know if there is a way to wake them up. I hope there is. I really do. But the reality is that I'm just not sure what that would be.
Wow. I am very with you on that. And unfortunately, as I learned from a Holocaust survivor that I was very close with, Max, he used to say to me, what are they waiting for? And again, this is, 25 years ago. What are they waiting for? To come home bloody at the end of the day? And it was, again, 25 years when I was 24, 25. We've been on this battle train. People, if you look in the news, you will see that the forever war is like this tagline being used in the media for Israel's war against the Palestinians, the Gazans. And in fact, it is the Arabs' forever war on the Jews. So I would have to say that we have to make it kosher to use that kind of language I think that that's a big dilemma is when are we allowed to say? So you said when you call them out, they block you, right?
Oh yeah.
They just shut down your voice.
I've been blocked by quite a few people who are pretending to be Jewish just to spread hate, you know, pro-Palestinian accounts that don't like being called out. A lot of them know what they're spreading is fake news. And I think that that is really kind of important to understand is that they know the truth. It's just they don't want to be called out on it because they want to spread this narrative about hating us. And you don't have to understand every war, every nuanced thing to understand that where anti-Semitism exists, lies against Jews exist. So lies against Israel are going to exist. Lies against Jewish political leaders are going to exist. Whether those political leaders sit in America or in Israel or Australia, it doesn't matter. There's going to be lies against them. And once you understand that, and you can actually say, whoa, hold on, let me reanalyze that, it gives you a different perspective.
It does. Okay, here's another kosher unkosher for you. We
Okay.
have a major boycott, divestment, and sanction campaign that has been going on for years against Israel. Just another part of the shall we call it Islamo-fascist jihad, but done through very creative ways. And we have yet to see the ability to boycott anything back because they don't create anything other than terrorists. But if we could, should we, is it kosher or unkosher to boycott not only Palestinian slash Arab jihadism, but would it be kosher to boycott the businesses that are actually involved in spreading the lies? Kosher or unkosher?
Kosher, 100%.
Kosher. Do you
Yes.
see any of that happening in America, the boycotting of the anti-Israel businesses?
I think it's quieter, but I think we do it. I think there's certain Huda Beauty. I think like I know a lot of people don't buy her line because of how anti-Semitic
Huh.
she is. A lot of people have stopped buying Adidas and the Starbucks thing's really iffy. And I think we do it quieter and I think we are more successful because it's quieter. But we're
Oh,
not gonna
that's
go I
interesting.
don't think we're going to go make a ruckus and start, protesting all these organizations, but I'm not going to go out of my way to spend money somewhere that is promoting hate against my people. And I think everyone has a right to boycott, whether I agree with it or not. But when you start saying, I'm not just going to boycott Israeli goods, I'm going to boycott Jewish goods, but you're not actually doing it. And then you're spreading hate. Like the BDS movement has taken things so much further than just, I'm going to boycott Israeli goods. Because listen, if you want to boycott Israeli goods and be plunged back into the Stone Ages, be my guest. I have a whole list on my Instagram. It's pinned on the top. You can see every single thing you're going to be missing out on medications, technology, all of it. You want to do it? Go ahead. But they've taken it a step further to be hateful, to start protesting and boycotting, Israeli and Jewish professors and students. And it's just become so much further than just this economic boycott.
It really has, and it has a whole emotional element to it. I remember when the Soda Stream factory was shut down, and it was a big upheaval because it had so many Palestinian workers. But I also have been talking a lot with even the farmers down on the southern border, who for years and years they had Gazans who worked in their factories and in their fields, and now they can't because who can you trust? So I think that could be another good kosher unkosher question, which is, do you think that it's kosher or unkosher to admit that we don't know who to trust and it's okay to take a step back right now? It's okay to assess, grow your knowledge, and find very effective ways where each person can make a difference.
It's kosher. I mean, even
It's kosher.
we've had some accounts pop up even in the past few days that we've discovered are pretending to be on our side and are really
Mm.
infiltrating. And so I think it is really good to take a step back and say, wait, this random account that's saying that they're pro-Israel, can I trust them or not? And that's actually, my account used to be fully anonymous. And I've actually started to show my face a little bit more, not because I'm trying to become famous. I'm really not. I want my content to stand on its own, but I want people to be able to trust me and see who I am. And that has actually helped a lot because people have said, oh, I know who you are now. I trust you. Like maybe I don't know all the news, but like I'm not somebody who's trying to
Right.
infiltrate. And so there's certain accountants that I trust with news, like the official accounts, or there's certain Jewish content creators like Johnny Daniels is usually very, very accurate with news.
Oh,
But
my friend
I
Johnny.
yeah, I try not to get news from these like tiny little Instagram accounts. I will wait to see it verified from a bigger account, even if I
Good
share
for you.
account. And I will absolutely, if somebody messages me with other information that I haven't seen, I will correct. I will, remove, there was this Tim Walls was like videoed eating ice cream and like apparently not answering a question. And somebody messaged me and like said, actually, like he's, at the state fair, he didn't hear the question. Like we don't really know what's going on. And so I actually said, like, hey guys, I'm not going to put this, I'm not going to promote this because I don't actually know. You can have your opinion about him. You can take the video however you want, but I'm not going to promote anything when I'm getting all this mixed information from people.
Hmm.
And so I think that that's also really important is to hold yourself accountable as somebody who is sharing news. I mean, I've been also wrongfully restricted by Instagram for sharing news that was actually correct from credible news sources. And so you have these like meta independent fact checkers that are wrongfully saying that there's information out there that's true that isn't true. So it's a little bit more complicated than just trying to find the right content creators, but also dealing with Meta's terrible restrictions on what is actually true.
Well, and we just got to call those unkosher completely because
Yeah.
they are restricting the Jewish voice. And now they've decided that even from the river to the sea is not anti Semitic. It is not calling for a genocide. And frankly, it is unkosher that they
Yes.
continue to allow any reference to what is happening in this war as a genocide against the Gazan people, because really we are so bad at committing a genocide if that's what's going on. I mean, they just will spew the lies. I think that you've hit on something very important, which is it's also unkosher to follow a single news source without backing up your references, without making sure that you have all of the facts. Even with the announcement of the 6 hostages, it was released before it had been announced. And that was a challenging situation for everybody. Some of the families indicated that they had found out through social media. We do have to maintain integrity in the way that we post and in what we post and the way we communicate. So I think that we have to say we have to keep kosher with our posting, and we also have to call out all the elements that are unkosher, whether it be through the Facebook and the Meta, the city councils, the education systems, and even in our own professional workspaces. Now, again, I'm in Israel. We live a whole different reality. That's why it's so beneficial for Israelis and diaspora Jews to come together. It's one of the things we try to do with Israel Forever. How can we hear each other better? And then we know that our story is always kosher because it's reflecting the diversity of the Jewish experience living in this war. The war is happening here in Israel, but there's a different war happening in the diaspora. And we are very lucky to have a young woman like yourself as one of our soldiers out of uniform. I mean, that's really what you are. Have you ever invited others to join you and to volunteer with your effort?
I get a lot of input. People send me stuff all the time. Even other
Good.
accounts I work with, they're like, hey, can you make this on kosher post and collaborate with me? Like, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's
But I'm the only one who
great.
like runs the account. Yeah.
That's great. And I'll mention, by the way, what you said about having to bring your face forward. I had to do that too. All these years that I've built Israel Forever, I've always been in the background writing the curriculum. I do a lot of consulting and public speaking and teaching, but it's one-on-one or it's with the direct group. But getting my face out on social media, I was like, no, it's not about me. It has nothing to do with me. And at the end of the day, what you said is exactly right. It is about us because they trust us. And there is something very different between women or individuals like us and those who are paid to take on this persona, to take on this voice. So let's ask that how you feel about paid influencers, kosher or unkosher.
I actually want to say kosher style here. And I'll tell you,
Oh, I like that.
there are some in influencers I know that the only money that they ask to be paid is for them to fly to speak with you, for their crew, and for them to make a living. And I think if that is their full-time job, that is a fully valid ask. But I think
Good.
I've seen some content creators on Instagram that get paid a lot of money for this. They ask for a lot of money. And so it is really hard to not see them differently and not
Hmm.
question who's paying them to hear, to see, to say what they're saying, to promote who they're promoting, especially when it comes to like
Right.
politics and stuff. It's a whole other thing I don't even want to get into, but
Yeah.
I see accounts promoting that. I'm like, is somebody paying them? They're very big account. Like
Yeah.
it's a very fine
Yeah.
line to walk.
Yeah, and there's also the influencers who they do have a big account, they have a big following. They make one post and the
Mhm.
whole world is like, wow, this person made a post. And it's like, yeah, but have you met this young woman from Texas who is like spending every day in her free time trying to do, or these young women there, or these young men here? And, you've got all these great young voices and older voices now coming out, all the different generations. And you know what we have to share in common? We have to stay committed to our passion with integrity. And I think that that is the most kosher of all, that we can make sure we do our work with the voice of honesty, transparency, and integrity. And then we'll be able to keep it kosher also for our children and their children.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It has been such a pleasure talking with you. You are a breath of fresh air on a very tough week. It seems like every week feels like a month. And I really wish for you a lot of success and many more collaborations, of course, with us at Israel Forever. And we look forward to featuring you again.